Hello. Welcome back to the Space Gulag, otherwise known as PPSW, your favorite hangout place, and we're back with another Star Wars story. Today we're going to voyage down the dark path and discover what could have been had Vader reached his full potential. How could the mechanical beast handle having the full power of a normal, able-bodied Anakin Skywalker, and how would he decide to take fate into his own hands? Before we begin this video, let's smash that like button, try and shoot for 2,000 likes in the first 24 hours, and I will release What If Plo Koon Trained Ahsoka. This is a video you definitely don't want to miss. We're also gunning for 50,000 subscribers, so join the Space Gulag if you want to be a part of our incredible journey here together. If you have ideas for videos, leave them down below. I do read over comments, but I don't do crossovers. And one last thing, if you want to support the channel, check out the Twitch, Patreon, and community Discord. Special shout out to George Story, Benjamin Wells, and Gort for being Grand Tier supporters, and Jay Hoffman, Icy Raptor, and Ward Pigman 308 as Masters of the Tier supporters on our Patreon. Thank you all for supporting the channel so much. And if you want to learn how to win a free lightsaber, watch to the end of the video, and I will tell you how. Our story begins a month after Vader's defeat at the hands of Obi-Wan Kenobi on the planet Mustafar. The Bacta tank is cold, but soothing the wounds of the lava scarring. When Anakin Skywalker lost, he became no more. On Mustafar, Anakin was killed, not by Obi-Wan, but by Darth Vader. One of two personalities took over and killed the other. Vader was more powerful, more vile, and more sinister of the two. Vader would be sure to make Anakin die alone, much like Padme did when Anakin killed her. While this was all by Sidious's design, there was nothing Vader could do about it now. The love of his life was gone, and the life he used to have was too. Anakin had everything, and then he threw it all away. The Bacta tank was quiet, and in the quiet, it was hard for Anakin. No, not Anakin. Vader now. He was now Vader. It was hard for Vader to sit in the unrelenting silence of the cooling waters. There was so much turmoil, and within that turmoil was the death of Anakin Skywalker. Anakin wasn't just killed by Kenobi. The death of Anakin Skywalker was a mental choice by Vader. When Order 66 came down and he marched into the Jedi Temple, Anakin was still there, but he was losing ground to the darkness. After killing the Separatists, his regrets came to his mind. Anakin was trying to break free, but then Padme arrived and everything changed. Vader didn't blame Obi-Wan for killing Anakin, but he did blame Obi-Wan for putting him in the position of physical torment. Vader sat idle with his mind focused on the darkness he had with him. He was feeling his rage, and the evil coursed throughout his body. The suit, designed by the Emperor, was torturous. It pained him to wear, and it was loose, and it created endless amounts of pain for him every time he wore it. Vader's Bacta tank was the only place of solitude he had. It was a place of painful refuge. Every time Vader came here, he suffered immensely. The dark side was corrupting, and it made his inner pain even more painful. Inside of the Bacta tank, Vader thought on everything over and over again, like a repeating loop. He was in for a wild ride, because as he tortured himself within the darkness, the dismantling of Anakin Skywalker was in full effect. As Anakin twisted his head around, as he faced down the agony of himself, his reflection sat across him inside of the Bacta tank, but he couldn't bear to look at it, because in Vader's mind, he still had limbs. He could still walk and move like a young man. While he wasn't a Jedi, he had robes of his own, and a body that wasn't burned to death. In Vader's mind, he was a real man, not just floating as a husk of skin without a body to call his own. Vader's mind was a fray, because of course, the thrill of being a leader was now gone. He was terrifying. Though just like in his mind, in the public eye, the hero of the Republic, Anakin Skywalker, was dead. No one other than the Emperor knew of Lord Vader and the hulking beast that he was. Vader was being kept away from public eye, but that wouldn't be the case forever. And there was also one more thing. Sidious kept a tight leash on Vader. The suit of armor was very restrictive, and even more so, it was extremely weak to lightning, something that Sidious was renowned for using. Sidious used it on Vader right after he first put on the mask. In Vader's rage at the death of his wife, he used the Force and threw objects across the room, and Palpatine was also hit with the Force. And he made sure that Vader knew his place, immediately electrocuting the newly crowned Sith. Vader knew that his life had changed, and whether it was for the best or for the worst, he had to live with the actions he had done, and the outcome of such of those actions. Vader opened his eyes inside of the Bacta tank and looked into the piercing yellow eyes of Darth Vader. He was Vader. There was no separation. Vader was all that was left, and he had to let go of the past. He needed to kill the past. He needed to let go of Anakin Skywalker, because Anakin Skywalker was weak. Anakin had no power, and because he was Anakin, Padme died. It was Anakin's fault. Vader was here to replace the fragile Jedi, who couldn't even save Padme's life. Instead, he killed her, and he had only himself to blame for that. The trials of losing his wife and child were more than painful, but living with the actions that had caused them was even more so than he could bear. Vader looked up and down as he saw the shell of a human being that he became when he killed Anakin Skywalker. Vader's eyes closed as he saw the past. His head jolted to the right as he opened them, and a vision became foggy as the respirator sounded like an alarm and his breathing picked up. The anxieties of the past were plagued, and Lord Vader, he couldn't handle it. He shook his head, his limbs were gone, he was stuck. He was immobile. He couldn't do anything. He was nothing. No one. He was just a slave. Again. Rage built in Vader as he saw his eyes, and then they drifted from the shallow reflection over to the suit that imprisoned him. Vader slowed down his breathing as he calmed down. He was imbalanced. He was losing his mind. He had to get out of the Bacta tank, but he couldn't. He needed a medical assistance to do that. Medical droids from all sides would have to pull him out of that cage. There was nowhere he could go without someone helping him. Vader looked at his limbs and thought back at the very moment to when he lost them. His arrogance cost him his body. Vader's skin was so deeply scarred, his flesh looked rotten. And even more so, Vader knew he couldn't leave the Bacta tank, because if he did, he would stop healing his body. Vader settled himself down into a deep sleep. While mentally, Anakin could tell himself that he was Vader and that Vader killed Anakin. Internally, Anakin was still there, regardless of what he did to change that. As he pulled himself into a deep sleep, he was once again Anakin. And a little bit of good that was left within him was showing brighter than the darkness ever could. Anakin had all of his limbs as he walked through the halls of the Jedi Temple. People smiled at him, bowed to him, respected him, and admired him. His robes were translucent white as the robes drifted elegantly across the carpeted floors of the Jedi Temple. Anakin looked over and saw the back of a man with the traditional brown and tan robes, with short brownish hair. Anakin picked up his speed as a slow walk turned into a sprint as he saw a slightly gray and brown bearded man turn around. It was Obi-Wan Kenobi, his master. Anakin ran up and hugged him, and Obi-Wan asked what was the matter. Anakin said he was so sorry for everything that happened. Obi-Wan smiled and asked what he meant. Anakin said he was so sorry that he destroyed the temple and killed everyone and turned against him and the Order. Obi-Wan placed his hand on Anakin's shoulder and asked if he was feeling alright. Obi-Wan told Anakin to look around. Anakin brought balance to the Force after he beat Dooku and killed Palpatine. The Republic won the war, and there was victory, not just felt across the galaxy, but within the Force itself. Obi-Wan looked at his former student and told him to close his eyes and feel the peace in the air. Anakin's smile rang across his face as he opened his eyes to see Ahsoka walking up behind Obi-Wan. Anakin ran over and picked her up as he squeezed her to death. He put her down and expressed how happy he was to see that she had survived as well. Ahsoka made a snarky remark about surviving because of Anakin's training. Anakin smiled as he looked around and saw Master Yoda walking up behind him. Anakin was too excited to see Master Yoda. On top of that, there was the entire council. They all smiled as they walked up and greeted Anakin as Master Skywalker, including Mace Windu. Anakin felt pure joy in his heart. He looked around, and the sprawling temple was full of life. The Jedi had survived, and the Force was in its best peace. Mace placed a hand on Anakin's shoulder and told him he was sorry for ever doubting him. Master Skywalker had truly earned Mace's respect and recognition. Anakin's teeth glistened as he looked at Mace Windu and placed his hand on the Jedi Master's shoulder. Deppa told the group of Jedi that it was time to go. Anakin asked where they were going, as Obi-Wan asked again if Anakin was okay. The Republic was throwing a celebration in honor of Anakin for helping restore peace to the galaxy. He had done something 2 different governments couldn't do, and 2 massive galactic armies couldn't do. Anakin brought peace and prosperity back to the Republic. Ahsoka nudged her master and told him that she was so proud of him. Anakin reached out his hand and asked if she was rejoining the Order. A small grin lined up across her cheek as she turned around and started walking away. Anakin's joy was unmatched, immeasurable, as he started walking forward and watched as everyone kept going further and further away from him. Anakin was stuck, walking in place. As he turned around to see his master's hand on his shoulder, with his piercing yellow eyes. Anakin turned around and cried out for help as all the Jedi turned around and looked at him. Mace's dominant arm fell to the ground as he was whisked away. Ahsoka was thrown away too. Yoda's cane dropped as he grabbed his chest like his little heart broke. Obi-Wan cried out, tears in his eyes, telling Anakin that he was his brother. Anakin reached up his hand as tears shot down his face as he tried to get the Jedi to help him, but they were all being pulled away. There was nothing Anakin could do about it either. He watched as everything was taken from him, and his outstretched arm began to deteriorate in front of his eyes. The white robes fell to the ground as metal replaced where skin used to be. Anakin cried out in a robotic no as he was jolted from his sleep. Vader's breathing was accelerated. Vader lowered his eyes. He looked at a frown in his reflection. He was so taken aback by the dream he had. He couldn't believe that there was still this part of him, this part that wished he could just be a Jedi and do what he should have done. Vader sighed inside of the tank, alone. He thought about Kenobi, wondering where he was, or any of the other Jedi, for that matter. The time inside of the bacta tank was like solitary confinement. There was no escape. It was just you and yourself. There was no one else. Vader would be freed from this prison and spend time with his new master. While there wasn't much he would actually be taught by his master, he'd be treated like an errand boy. Sidious would continuously send Vader out to do tasks that he himself never really wanted to do. Vader at this point didn't have his lightsaber, and when he was pulled from the bacta tank, he felt the true pain and suffering inside of him. Walking inside the suit of Vader was painful, and even more so a tedious task. It would cost not Anakin, Vader a lot of physical turmoil, something that would drive him further into the darkness. The early months of being Vader were excruciating. He was teetering on the light and the dark. He wanted so badly to forget his past, but it wasn't as easy as he thought it would be. Anakin was still in there somewhere, but he wasn't exactly in there. Vader was the front of the man, and the name of the machine that scarred the Imperial clone troopers, Imperial officers, and just about anybody who faced down the dark metallic skeleton of Anakin Skywalker. Sidious would eventually put Vader to the task of killing his first Jedi, and it would eventually be accomplished, though the Jedi was almost able to best Vader. Darth was only able to best the Jedi by using civilians as bait. This truly made Vader question if the dark side was truly stronger. But all of his woes and questions about the dark side would be answered when he would return to the place where he lost it all, where he lost his master and lost to him his wife and all of his limbs. Vader would go to Mustafar and learn from the dark powers from within the Force. There was a cave near where Obi-Wan beat Anakin, and inside of that cave was a shrine to the Sith. The dark eminence here belonged to that of Lord Momin, an ancient Sith Lord. It would be here inside of the Sith cave and Sith temple where he would be able to bleed his first lightsaber crystal. Vader would feel the true power of darkness surge throughout him as he turned the crystal of a former Jedi Master into a crystal of crimson. Vader was one step closer to becoming a true Sith Lord. Though, inside of this shrine, he would be contacted by an ancient Sith Lord. Lord Momin would help Vader with his journey into the darkness, and while this journey would elongate Vader's stay on Mustafar, it would be here where Vader would decide to build himself a fortress of power, a castle of Vader. It was to remember his greatest failure, and to rise above that what Obi-Wan did to him. On Mustafar, Vader would become his true self, and then, when he realized he could achieve his full power, even with the suit. While the Chosen One had lost most of his limbs, the Force was so powerful within him that he would be able to access the true power of the Force, even without them. Vader would concentrate himself on this Force and this darkness as his castle would be built around him. As the first year of being Darth Vader would find itself complete, Vader would have grown immensely. He was a true powerhouse, and the Force was completely offset by the growth of his power. His personal training on Mustafar was leading him to an unreal amount of power, and every being who was still connected with the Force themselves could feel the immediate change in the Force. While it was equivalent to that of the darkness that had taken over the galaxy, with Sidious as Emperor of the Galaxy, it was more alarming when the most evil being in the galaxy had competition for being the most evil being in the galaxy. Vader's power grew on Mustafar, and while Anakin had a basic understanding of all 7 lightsaber forms, Vader would be able to perfect each and every single one of these 7 forms, as his castle rose into the skies of Mustafar. Vader also realized something. He realized that killing the Jedi Master gave him a sense of relief. It made his evil heart burn with passion. Vader knew that the way to supplement himself was to make those around him suffer. Vader was a Sith, and now no one in the galaxy could stop the metallic beast known as Lord Vader. In due time, Sidious, who knew of this rise to power, would start to dislocate his apprentice from his newfound home on Mustafar. Sidious knew that if Vader was growing in power, he needed to remind him who was in charge, and so, Sidious removed Vader from his home base of operations and began to send him out across the galaxy to serve the Empire. Vader's unknown face would become very well known as he took the mantle as the right-hand man to the Emperor and the leader of the Imperial military operations. Vader would be sent far and wide, out across the galaxy. Darth Vader would become his name, that name a Jedi would fear, as it tore through Jedi Knights, Jedi Masters, and anybody who crossed his path. While there were those who helped the Jedi, they would soon learn the terror that would accompany their aid to the Jedi. Vader would show up on planets and break the entire population to find a Jedi. Vader didn't hold back, and he came into his own when he searched for a Jedi. Finding a Jedi was easy. They were bound to their code, and it meant that if someone was in need, they would go out of their way to help them. But if they helped, they would be found and slaughtered without remorse. There was little a Jedi could do to escape the clutches of the Empire or of Vader. While Vader's rampage across the galaxy was used to bolster pride in the Empire, Sidious went to the planet Mustafar to take a deep dive into what it was that was elevating Vader's power so quickly. Under the castle there was a Sith shrine. Sidious knew of it because he had been to it before Vader even became his apprentice. Sidious didn't know, though, that there was an ancient Sith Lord that roamed the caverns of the Sith shrine. When Sidious found the ghost of Momin, he expelled him from existence in the afterlife. Sidious's rage was unmatched. He was unbelievably pissed that Vader was seeking guidance from another Sith Lord. Sidious knew he would make Vader suffer for this. It would take time for Vader to return from Battlefront, but in his newly constructed castle on the throne awaited a familiar face. Vader was returning from Kashyyyk. He was there to kill a couple of escaped Jedi, and when he arrived, he didn't just kill them, but he slaughtered the Wookiees of the planet as well. He bent them to their knees and then crushed their entire population into almost extinction. Vader abused the Jedi as he slaughtered every single one of them, without remorse. Vader knew that Sidious was inside of his castle, and there was nothing that upset him as much as this did. Vader's castle was his refuge. It was his place where he truly became a Sith Lord, and with Lord Momin there, he knew he'd be able to grow into the powerful Sith that Sidious couldn't train him to become. Upon Vader's return to his castle, he didn't feel the presence of Momin, and this only aggravated him more. Vader walked into the massive elevator shaft as it rose into the castle itself, and opened up into a massive room. With a large throne, Vader stepped out of the elevator as he looked at his master, who stood up. Sidious was here to bring Vader back down to the pet he was. But Sidious forgot one thing. He forgot that Vader was no Maul. Vader didn't crumble. He had a strong structure, and he was growing in his power. Sidious liked Maul because he was easy to control. If he lifted a finger, Maul would bow to the ground. But Vader was not that apprentice. Vader's will was unstoppable and his determination was admirable, unless you were his teacher. Sidious walked out from around the throne and looked at his apprentice. Vader didn't kneel. Sidious questioned Vader's motives as he grinned at his apprentice. Vader didn't say a word. All that could be heard was the audible breathing. It echoed around the massive throne room as Vader looked down at Sidious. Vader had nothing to say, but Sidious could feel everything his apprentice was feeling. Sidious asked Vader if he really thought he could best him. The suit made him weak. There was nothing more powerful than the power in Sidious. But he knew that Vader's suit was weak to one thing, and that one thing was lightning. Sidious then said so be it, as he raised his hands. Vader raised his blade as he ignited it in a firestorm of lightning as it sprawled across the room at Vader as he blocked the lightning as he walked forward. Sidious used all of his might as he tried to throw Vader's lightsaber away, but the grip was unstoppable. Then Vader took out his hand and raised it as he used the Force to throw the lightning back at Sidious. The Sith Lord was thrown from his feet as he flew into the wall behind him. Vader looked down at his master as he walked over with the lightsaber drawn. Sidious, for the first time, feared for his life against Vader. A lightsaber climbed out of his sleeve as Palpatine rose to his feet, ready to duel his apprentice. Sidious drove his blade forward as Vader sidestepped and used the Force to throw the blade to the ground. Vader swung at Palpatine as the Sith Lord moved around and blocked the strike. Vader and Palpatine started pacing around each other as they tapped blades here or there, before really going in after one another. Vader was quick to block every strike, and find a way to use the Force to parry every other strike. Vader's Force abilities kept him in the fight as he continued to maneuver his way around the Sith Lord. Sidious kept his blade positioned forward. It hadn't been close to 2 years since he had lost to Windu in the Senate chambers on Coruscant. Sidious tried to fight against the Dark Lord, but Vader's power had grown so immensely he had no way to combat it. Vader, on the other hand, could sense the dread building from within Sidious. He used that to his advantage. Sidious tried to strike at Vader when his hand was grabbed by Vader's metallic hand. Vader's soulless mask looked into the eyes of Palpatine as Sidious felt pain cover his body, as his hand was crushed by Vader's metal grip. Vader kicked Sidious in the stomach as he raised the Sith Lord from the ground with his hand. Vader looked at Sidious without saying a word, as he used the dark side of the Force to levitate the Sith Lord in the air as he choked him without killing him. Vader looked at Sidious and then tilted his head ever so slightly as he raised his hands, and red electricity darted from Vader's metallic hands. While this would fry the circuitry inside of Vader's suit, he wanted to show the Emperor who was in charge here, and how Sidious was no longer in control of anything or the choices that Vader would make. Vader's left arm went immobile as Sidious was covered in red scarring across his body. Vader then told his master that he should learn to know what true fear was. Sidious's essence was full of terror. Vader felt the same fear from Sidious as he felt from the younglings inside of the temple. Ironically, the biggest regret of Order 66 to Vader was executing the younglings. He knew they didn't deserve what he did to them, but they were treated like animals when he slaughtered them as such, and they stood there helplessly as they watched. Vader, from under the mask, smiled as he lowered Sidious to the ground and pulled him into his metallic hand with the Force. Vader used the Force to bring life to his circuit-shot hand as he pulled his arm back and laid a striking punch in Sidious as the Sith Lord fell unconscious in his hand. Vader released the grip as Sidious fell to the floor limp. Vader called for his guard to set up a holding machine for Sidious. He was going to make Sidious suffer and basically become an ornament in his room. At the same time, Vader requested all the Grand Moffs, all the Grand Admirals, and every single high-ranking Imperial to his castle immediately. Sidious would be thrown into a holding cell in the middle of Vader's throne room, the royal guards who didn't obey were slaughtered, with a simple snapping of their necks. Vader made sure that all those who didn't obey him would not survive for any longer. It would take hours, but eventually the highest-ranking Imperials across the galaxy would begin to show up to Vader's castle, and they would one by one make their way up to the throne room to see Lord Vader, who awaited them ever so patiently. Sidious was still unconscious as Vader watched him from his throne. As the Imperial officers came in, Vader watched as they all looked at Sidious with shock in their eyes. Vader requested that each and every single one of them stand in the corner of the room adjacent from Palpatine's holding cell until the rest of the leaders entered the throne room. Thrawn, Yularen, Tarkin, and many more high-ranking Imperials entered the throne room as they all looked at their Emperor, and the 2 royal guards scattered across the floor, with 2 more standing next to the Emperor's prison. Vader rose from his seat and walked down the line of Imperial officers. He asked them who they were loyal to, as one of them spoke up, just in time for the Emperor to awaken. The officer said he was loyal to the Emperor, the one true Emperor. Sidious laughed, as Vader didn't give him the time to look over as he snapped the officer's neck with the Force. Vader walked down the line, as he continued, telling every officer that the true ruler of the Empire was him. If they believed otherwise, then they would face the same fate as the officer who was just killed. They all saluted to him. Vader told them that the Empire would become more powerful without a weak fool in command. Vader turned around and walked over to Sidious and looked at his former master. There was no power in the universe that could stop Vader, and the loyal officers knew it, though there were 1 or 2 that had their doubts, and when Vader turned around, he could feel their fear. As if they knew, he could hear into their minds and hear the words that they were thinking to themselves. Vader wasn't just all-powerful, he was fully constructed into the Sith Lord to rule the galaxy, the one true ruler of the Empire, and now he was going to make Sidious suffer for the broken promise he made of Padme's survival. Vader dismissed the officers, telling them to inform everyone of the new change. Anyone who didn't like the change were to be executed on sight. If they weren't executed, Vader would have the officers killed themselves. Vader was going to establish a legacy to him and him alone. No one would be willing to stand up to Vader, and no one would be strong enough to willingly disobey the orders of the newly installed Emperor. Once the officers were dismissed, Vader looked at Sidious, as Sidious tried to tell Vader that he would fail at building this empire. Vader looked at his master without saying a word. His breathing was menacing, his silence was terrifying, and his lack of action to silence Palpatine was even scarier. Vader moved back to his throne and sat silently. Sidious thought this was weakness of Vader. Rather, it was his own folly that Vader was taking advantage of. Vader, since becoming one with himself, was able to become a master manipulator. Vader was also very good at tormenting the mind. He did it to Jedi he came across, and he made them suffer for their inability to see through him. Vader was a true menace, and no force in the galaxy would make an equal to him. Though Vader had an idea, and he was going to take advantage of a system that Sidious had set up. The Inquisitorius were set up, and they were full of former Jedi. Vader was told to train them, and while he lamented them, he would find use in them after all. He would tell them to go out into the galaxy, searching for someone very specific. He told them that they were to find this man and bring him back alive. There was a proposition on the table for the one Vader was looking for. Vader would eventually leave Sidious behind as he made his way to Coruscant. While it was true that Sidious was an incredible, powerful Sith Lord, Vader made sure that he wouldn't have a chance to escape. The holding prison restricted Palpatine's ability to use the Force, and the two guards who stood next to him wouldn't listen. While Sidious was powerful, they hadn't ever seen Sidious use his power. Vader used his power, and his power gave them fear of him. Vader's power would be seen as he moved his way across the galaxy and into the Senate building, where he would assume control of the Imperial Senate. While Vader wasn't exactly a political face, especially with the mask he wore, he would place a loyal dog to fill the role on the Imperial Senate, and that would be Grand Moff Tarkin. Though now it would be more of a Minister Tarkin, who held the role of holding together the Galactic Empire, while also taking orders from Emperor Vader. Now, while Tarkin was loyal to the Emperor as in Sidious, he would find true loyalty in Vader himself. The newly crowned Emperor wouldn't really change much, but his rule of the galaxy would be stiff. Vader would not hold back from Imperial officers who were overzealous in nature, and Vader's Imperial military would be strict, and it would be unable to be broken. While it had only been 2 years since the fall of the Republic and the rise of the Empire, Vader had much work to do. Mostly, he had to find the surviving members of the Jedi Order and wipe them off the galactic map. While Vader would take to that himself, he had much more to uncover about being a Sith Lord in the galaxy. Though Vader would be requested back to Mustafar before he could continue back to his study. Vader returned to his castle as he returned with full power and rage behind him. He wasn't exactly thrilled to be pulled away from what it was that he wanted to do. Vader walked into his throne room and saw the Grand Inquisitor, standing and waiting, upbeat as ever. Vader asked what it was that was so important, as he turned his head and saw a red Zabrak walk out from the shadows. Sidious hissed as Vader reached his hand out towards his former master and began crushing Sidious's organs. Sidious cried out in pain as Vader released him and moved over to his throne, as Maul followed Vader. The Grand Inquisitor and the rest of the Inquisitors were sent out to find Darth Maul. Vader wanted an apprentice, and he assumed that the only other Sith in the galaxy with just as much hate for Kenobi would be the perfect apprentice. While he never knew if Maul would be willing to serve under him, it was worth a shot, because Maul was once a former Sith, and Maul was more powerful than the Inquisitors, and Vader knew that. While on the other side of things, Maul was trying to figure out how he could play Vader, though Vader knew of this, and it wouldn't take much more than an instant for Maul to be lifted up into the air in the middle of the room. Sidious began to truly fear what it was that Vader became. He was unstoppable. Vader rose from his throne and told Maul that he had one decision to make, and that decision would decide the rest of his life. Whether or not Maul knew it, Vader was inside of his mind, and he knew everything that Maul would do before he did it. Maul had spent the longer part of a decade trying to get out of Hell and start his own criminal empire, and while he willingly came with the Grand Inquisitor to visit Vader, he didn't realize that Vader was the powerhouse that he really was. Maul expected this to go up as a team-up and take down the Emperor, but then he realized the Emperor was already dealt with. He decided that he would partner with Vader until he could kill him, but he didn't know that Vader was so powerful that he would find that out. As Vader held Maul suspended in the air, the Grand Inquisitor watched with an evil grin across his face. Maul screamed out in pain as Vader walked around and stood before Maul, awaiting his decision. Maul told Vader he would serve. Maul lowered the Sith to the ground, as he told Maul that he would call him Master. If there was a thought in Maul's head, Vader would know it. Vader turned around as he expected Maul to get on his knees, and the older Sith did. Maul would be obedient to Vader, and Vader could feel it through the Force. Maul would assist Vader with errands, something that Vader would use his Inquisitors for as well. Maul and the Inquisitors would go out across the galaxy and begin to hoard Sith artifacts for Vader's castle. As the years would begin to speed by, Vader would continue his torture of Sidious. Vader's influence on the galaxy may have been a bit harsher, but with someone like Grand Moff Tarkin leading the Imperial Senate, Vader was free to send his armies across the galaxy for his own personal errands. Vader would also slaughter the Jedi mercilessly from star system to star system. Any planet that was found of hiding Jedi as a refuge would burn. Vader made it apparent to any star system across the galaxy that if there was a Jedi, they would be targeted by the Empire. While Vader's reach expanded across the galaxy, especially with the inclusion of Crimson Dawn, Vader was the one who grew in his true power. His Force essence had quadrupled, and there was no one, absolutely no one, that was a match for him in this galaxy. Even with the suit of armor, he was immensely powerful, and as he learned over the corresponding decade, the suit had absolutely no effect on him. With Maul and the Inquisitors bringing Sith artifacts to him from across the galaxy, he was able to hone in on his power while making his master watch him grow exponentially more powerful. Vader wouldn't change his suit though. As he grew more and more powerful, the suit would have less and less of an effect on him. Vader over the years had matured. He was now calm and collected, and the most feared being across the galaxy. Vader would single-handedly make a planet crumble to its knees if they held traitors to the Empire. And while there were pockets of rebels, they feared the Empire. They feared Vader. Because Vader wasn't just an enforcer, he was the Emperor, and he was the most powerful political being in the galaxy, and when civilizations were found with Jedi, the galaxy would watch as everyone was reduced to ash. Vader's thoughts and imbalance towards the light was dead. He was fully a part of the darkness. He was a victim of the darkness, and there was nothing that anyone could do to bring him back. While it could be said that there were political figures against the Empire, the Organas and the Mothmas kept quiet. Even more so, the daughter of Organa, Leia, was sent away, because Bail knew that she would be in better hands if she was trained by the Jedi. Luke's uncle, on the other hand, was much more resilient when it came to the pleas of Kenobi, but when Owen saw what was happening to the galaxy, he knew he needed to give it up. He needed to let Obi-Wan train the boy. The only sign of resistance across the galaxy was from Saw Gerrera, but his band of terrorists were feeling the pressure of the galaxy to give it all up. Every time Saul and his band were spotted, a planet burned. It wasn't even the planet they were on, it was just selected at random. The Jedi were all but extinct, except for a couple council members, one of which Vader had personally killed. The other three, still unheard of though. Vader spent most of his time in his castle. He never talked down to Sidious, he always just ignored him, no matter what it was that Sidious said. Vader's goal was long-term torture, and Sidious was surviving off of very little. He was even barely alive, just like Vader was on Mustafar. Vader's revenge against Sidious was working brilliantly, especially since Sidious had been cut off from the Force for the longer part of a decade. He had no ability to use the Force, and he had no ability to remove himself from the awkward position he was consistently stuck in. Vader toyed with Sidious, but there was nothing Sidious could do. Vader was the ultimate power in the universe, and even more so, Vader would limit the construction of the Death Star. He believed it was an overzealous use of power. Vader knew that the Imperial military's might would have worlds fearing for an invasion. Killing the entire planet with an instant didn't really give fear. It was sweet relief from what the military could do. Burn down cities, make people suffer, to scare the population into permanent fear. While the Empire was quick to reduce planets to ash, their punishment would be seen as a chance to rebuild. When a civilization burned, the Empire would go back in and pick up the pieces because they believed that a world would become indebted to the Empire, and most of the time they would. After seeing what they could do and what they could lose, only to be replaced immediately by the Empire, it was a testament to their true power, though those that did stay rebellious would be wiped off the map yet again. Those who were loyal to the Empire would get their chance to refuge elsewhere of the civilization that would have been destroyed. Though Vader had one very large issue that was causing him to lose patience. He was becoming ever so angry at the fact that Obi-Wan was still alive, out in the galaxy, and then he got a communication. Vader looked over at the communication, and it was an apprentice named Maul. Maul was very reliable. Vader and Maul had a mutual understanding, and Vader wasn't extremely strict on Maul either, because he knew that Maul wouldn't do anything. Regardless, Maul was in contact with Lord Vader, because he found a Jedi Master still alive on the planet of Yavin 4. Vader whipped around as his cape glided across the surface as he marched out of his room and down to his shuttle. There were 3 Imperial Star Destroyers over the planet Mustafar, mostly there to protect the Emperor from invasion, but also to ensure no loyalists came to save Sidious. When Vader first took over, there was consistent infighting within the Empire. It didn't last long because most of the powerful Imperial officers in the military sided with Vader, but there were those who saw favor with Sidious, and they paid the price for it. Vader's fleet crushed loyalist oppositionists, and even more so, Vader slaughtered anyone that came into his castle looking to rescue the Emperor. Vader was quick to arrive over Yavin. He looked down at the planet. There was already an Imperial Star Destroyer hovering over the planet. It was Maul's personal Star Destroyer. Vader requested for a shuttle as he moved to the surface. Finding Maul's personal TIE advanced. Vader's shuttle landed, and the eerie Sith Lord walked down the ramp into the brush. Maul was standing awaiting his master. He wore a dark robe and a hood covering his head as he looked at his master. He told Vader that a former High Council member was present on the planet. She had survived. She was never reported killed, just like Kenobi. Vader stepped forward as he walked out of the brush, as Maul watched from behind. The Togruta Jedi looked up from a meditative stance as she saw Vader walking towards her. She didn't budge as Vader continued walking forward, and then he stopped. He knew this was too easy. One more step, and 5 lightsabers ignited. Maul stood behind. He knew better than to interject. Killing Jedi was his favorite sport, but Vader would kill him if he tried to kill a Jedi. The 5 Jedi ran at Vader as Shaak Ti rose to her feet, igniting the 6th lightsaber. Vader didn't ignite his lightsaber as he moved to the strikes of the Jedi. Vader dodged as he stepped from side to side, using his hands to throw their lightsabers away from him and using the Force to throw them at one another. Then Vader felt a familiar presence as he turned around and saw a much younger Togruta making her way around as she swung at Vader. A lightsaber ignited as Maul threw his blade in between Ahsoka and his master. He pulled the blade back and Vader ignited his lightsaber and began to fight the 6 Jedi. Vader's strikes were still heavy, but they were swift and decisive. Vader blocked the lightsaber of a Wookiee as he kicked a Chiss Jedi Master to the stomach. Vader grabbed the lightsaber of another Jedi as he struck them down with it. 5 more remaining. Maul watched from the tree line as the Jedi continued trying to kill him. He watched as he saw the fire inside of Vader burn when he fought the Jedi Master, who moved swiftly against him. The Wookiee Jedi tried to get a strike on Vader, but Vader sidestepped as he tripped the Wookiee with his robotic foot, pressing the assault forward on Master Shaak Ti. Master Vern and Ahsoka ran at Vader, at the same time as Vader cut through one of the other Jedi that was still standing. 4 Jedi left. Maul snickered to himself. While he would love to kill the Jedi, he was old, and he was watching this as a sport. While Maul wanted to be the one that was in control, he could live with second in command. Vader used the Force as he held up Vern and Ahsoka in the air as he pressed his assault on Shaak Ti, pushing her back further and further. Gungi got up and ran over to fight the Sith Lord, as Vader pulled his arm around his back and grabbed Gungi by the throat. The Wookiee warrior yelped helplessly as he was picked off his feet by Vader as the Sith Lord moved closer and closer to Shaak Ti. Vader took Gungi and slammed him against the rough ground, and turned around and threw him at Vern and Ahsoka, who were still stuck in place as they were too thrown from their feet. Vader focused on Shaak Ti. She was an accomplished duelist, but she was fighting Darth Vader, the most powerful being to ever exist. Vader cut off her hand as she cried out and fell to her knees. Vader walked up to Shaak Ti and slowly plunged his blade into her chest. Ahsoka, Vern, and Gungi all rose to their feet as they watched Shaak Ti fall down lifelessly. Vader turned around as he looked at the terror in their eyes. Vader didn't have time for pleasantries, and while he was surprised Ahsoka survived, especially after finding the Venator with all of the troops of hers dead, and even her lightsaber, he assumed she was dead too. But now, she had to die. There was no good in Vader as he stepped forward as his metallic boots snapped to the ground. He continued forward as the 3 Jedi spaced out around Vader, trying to surround him. Master Vern ran at Vader. As Vader snapped his neck, the Chiss Jedi Master fell to the ground. Vader walked towards Ahsoka, who was in the middle, as he and her clashed blades. Gungi, who'd come so far, tried to join in as Vader grabbed Gungi's neck and squeezed it until it snapped in his metallic hand. Ahsoka was all that was left. Vader gave her a shot before he had enough of this dueling. He froze her in her place, and he gave her one shot. Join him, or die. Ahsoka expressed that she believed that there was still... Vader cut her down before she could finish her sentence. Maul snickered from the Force as Vader told Maul that it was time to go. The two left the system after claiming the lives of all 6 Jedi. The Jedi stood no chance at surviving the encounter, and the time to bring Anakin back from Vader was gone. Vader was in full control, and there was no doubt. Palpatine wasn't able to instill instability within Vader, because he wasn't given all the time to belittle Vader and make him feel inferior to who he really was. On the other side of the galaxy, Yoda sat on a rock, as he and Obi-Wan trained the children of Skywalker. Luke and Leia were growing into extremely powerful beings. Obi-Wan had learned from training Anakin how to be the best teacher for the two. Leia was more advanced than Luke because she had a head start on her training. The 2 young children were excelling in their training, and they were extremely impressive. While they were only 14 years old, they were incredible. For Obi-Wan and Yoda, they saw the 2 children as hope for a better future for the people of the galaxy. Dagobah was her home, and Luke and Leia thrived in the darkness, but their rising power would become noticeable across the galaxy. Because they were so powerful, the cloud around Dagobah would begin to reveal the cloak of their presence. It wouldn't be long until Vader noticed it, though the Jedi on the planet wouldn't know. These Jedi were the last formidable threat in the galaxy. If they lost, or if they were discovered, there would be no one else that could kill or stop Vader and his Empire. The Empire was too strong, and the dark side was overbearing. The hope that Luke and Leia was all the galaxy had to hope for. Obi-Wan and Yoda trained them well, though they had balance, and they were extremely well gifted. Their combined power would be enough to stop Vader, but they still needed time. 14-year-olds would be effective, but not exactly the power they could achieve that they would have when they were adults. Vader, on the other side of the galaxy, would return to his castle with Maul in tow. The Grand Inquisitor was waiting for Vader. While Vader was strict, he never had an issue with the Grand Inquisitor or Darth Maul waiting for him inside of his throne room. They all had some kind of mutual respect for one another, especially because Vader had no issue with trusting the Grand Inquisitor or Maul, because they knew who had all the power, and it wasn't them. Vader moved back to his throne and sat down comfortably, as Maul and the Grand Inquisitor stood there. The Grand Inquisitor looked at Vader, and Vader asked what it was that he wanted to say. The Grand Inquisitor said that he felt something off within the Force. While he knew Vader was coming down from his murder spree, there was a rising light in the galaxy, and he sent his Inquisitors out across the galaxy to find where it was coming from. While it was easy for Vader to pick up on this, he missed it. He missed the scent because of his murder spree and his lack of focus. Vader was completely in control, but he was so focused in the wrong areas that he never picked up on this. It was brief flashes of light in the Force, but Vader's focus elsewhere drew his attention elsewhere. But the flashing feelings of light was now a glowing force. It was present, and it wasn't going away. It was one final chance for the Jedi and those who were still alive, that hadn't found their way into hiding, made their way to Dagobah. They knew that they needed to get there immediately. It was one last chance at redemption for the Jedi Order. But when the ships started arriving, the fear began to shower down the backs of Kenobi and Yoda. It meant that Vader and the Empire would also be there quickly, because if the Jedi picked up on the scent, then so would Vader. The truth was, the second Vader sat down in his seat, he was getting back up and making his way to Dagobah, though he didn't know he was going there yet. He was going back to his ship. He wanted to be sure that when he got the coordinates of where this force was coming from, he could jump to hyperspace. Vader's cape followed behind him as Palpatine grinned from the cell. Maul and the Grand Inquisitor followed closely behind. They made their way to Vader's personal Star Destroyer, when the second sister made them aware of the location of the light in the Force as she watched multiple ships crusade down onto the planet of Dagobah. The Jedi were clearly organizing for one final stand. Vader told her to await for their arrival, to not make a move, as the Star Destroyer shot into hyperspace. Vader stood on the bridge, staring into hyperspace as the Grand Inquisitor and Maul flanked him. They could feel his rage building. Maul and the Grand Inquisitor watched what Vader could do. They've both seen him rip apart groups of Jedi. This seemed like the Jedi's final stand, and their final chance to survive. And Vader, he was going to kill every single one of them. He was going to make sure that every single Jedi suffered. The ship arrived at a hyperspace as the second sister docked inside of the Star Destroyer. When she got out of her shuttle, she saw Vader march into his ship as Maul and Grand Inquisitor stood in the hallway watching him. The second sister was a bit intimidated. She could feel the rage bellowing inside of Vader. The shuttle left, and she looked at the Grand Inquisitor and Maul as they walked back up to the command deck. Vader's shuttle was like a ghost as it plummeted down into the surface of Dagobah. He could feel the presence of Kenobi, and he could feel the presence of Yoda. Vader was going to do something his former master couldn't. He would kill the Jedi, the only Sith to exterminate the entire religion. The ship landed in the swamplands, and Vader walked down from the ramp. As he looked into the fog, he could feel the life around him, and he could feel their fear. There were dozens of Jedi who were coming to the source of light, and Vader was going to make sure that the light would be extinguished by an overbearing darkness. Vader walked across the swamplands, stepping on uneven ground, as he stopped and saw the former Grand Master step out from the forest. Vader didn't have time for this and immediately snapped Yoda's neck, as he felt the fear grow into pure terror. The Jedi were brought here to die, and he was going to be the one that killed them all. Vader heard a small child cry out as he turned around and saw a boy, too young to have been at the temple during Order 66, run out at him, igniting his lightsaber. Vader sidestepped the boy and twisted his hand as the boy's neck snapped and dropped to the ground. Vader turned around and spoke aloud. He said he knew that there were several Jedi here, and he said that he would find them and kill them. 3 Jedi started running out of the tree line away to their ships, as a wave of force drain climbed out of Vader's glove, as they fell in their paths, feeling their lives be drained from them. A shuttle from the other side started to take off, with 5 Jedi aboard it. Vader reached over with his other hand and grabbed the ship out of the air. Vader started clenching his fist as the ship crumbled in his hands. Another ship began to take off, as Vader threw the wreckage of the ship into the other ship that was taking off. The 3 Jedi lay on the ground as Vader finished draining their force essences. He continued walking forward as the tree line surrounding him echoed with the sound of lightsabers. And standing in front of him was a green lightsaber held by Master Voss. Behind him, he heard the sound of a familiar lightsaber. It was Kenobi. Vader had to kill 20 Jedi, plus Kenobi and Voss. Vader didn't move as he looked around to see young and old faces alike. And then he saw a girl, to be the same age of the boy he had just killed. Vader thought it was weird to see 2 young Jedi here. They weren't old enough to be a part of the Order by the time it fell. Maybe they were a Jedi's child. The Jedi began to run at Vader, and his lightsaber whipped out from his belt as he threw it around. It cut down 3 Jedi, as it pulled it back and cut through a 4th. Vader clashed with a Jedi and then another. His brute strength was no match for those who tried to fight him. The Jedi swung. There were 4 or 5 of them at the same time as Vader moved around, using the Force to throw their blades away from him, as he combated one of the Jedi on one. 3 strikes in a row and the Jedi was slain. Vader moved around as he clashed blades with Quinlan Voss. Vader moved like a hulking beast, and the Jedi moved delicately and lightly. They were struggling more and more as they faced down the true power of Vader himself. Quinlan was thrown from his feet as Vader clashed with Vader, pushing an advantage against the Dark Lord, who struggled against him again. Kenobi had spent the last 10 years training in case he had another chance of seeing Vader and stopping him. Though he was committed towards the children of Skywalker, he wanted to make sure that they would be ready for fighting their father. But with Luke dead and Leia fearing the full might of Vader, Kenobi knew he and Quinlan were the best shot against the hulking Sith Lord. Vader pulled his blade around as he threw Quinlan from his feet as he cut his blade across the face of another Jedi, killing her. Vader pulled himself around as he blocked the attack of Kenobi. There were so many Jedi and he knew he had to focus himself as Vader used the Force to throw Kenobi off of his feet. Vader turned around as he clashed with Quinlan and with another 2 Jedi, who moved side by side, the Jedi Master. Vader cut down 2 more Jedi as he moved into attack position against Quinlan. Vader felt the presence of more Jedi running towards him, and he used the power of his Force, and he lifted the rest of the Jedi, other than Kenobi, into the air. Vader choked them all out, and then, as they tried their best to escape or survive, he crushed their windpipes as a remaining bunch of Jedi fell to the ground. Vader turned around and looked at Kenobi. He could see that Kenobi's broken heart was broken yet again. As Obi-Wan yelled out at Vader, he screamed that Vader killed his own children. Vader stood questioning what he meant. Kenobi yelled out telling Vader that his children were here. He didn't even give them a chance. Obi-Wan's heart sank lower than ever before as Vader looked around and spotted Luke with his head twisted around, and then his eyes followed the trail of bodies until he saw Leia. A saddened no crawled out of Vader's mouth. He didn't realize his children were born, and he didn't know Padme had survived. Vader cried out as Kenobi watched Vader slam his hand into the ground as the entire planet crumbled below Vader's hand. Vader's rage was so immense and the pain he felt was so powerful, he used the Force and crushed the entire existence of the planet Dagobah out of existence. Inside of the Imperial Star Destroyer, they watched as the entire planet exploded before their very eyes. Maul and the Grand Inquisitor stepped back. They couldn't believe what they had just saw. The Grand Inquisitor told his men to get search crews out and search immediately for Vader's body. Maul looked at the Grand Inquisitor with hatred in his eyes. The Grand Inquisitor told Maul that if Vader survived, then he doesn't want to face the wrath that he would bring down anywhere in the galaxy. Maul looked at the Grand Inquisitor. He knew he was right, as he looked out of the window to see the breeze of what used to be a structure, a former planet, floating around and floating towards them. The Star Destroyer was turned around to get the ship away from the massive chunks of planet that were currently flying out from where the planet used to be. Their search crews got to work as they eventually found their Emperor floating through space. He was still alive, and he was all-powerful, and even more so, his respirator helped him stay alive with the lack of oxygen in space. Vader would be brought back into the ship as they returned back to Mustafar. It wouldn't take long for Vader to awake, like it was a bad dream. He looked around and he saw himself in the reflection of his bacta tank. He saw the missing limbs and the suit on the other side of the room. Vader didn't know if it was all a dream. He didn't know if it was. Was it all a dream? He then saw a door open and in came Sidious, using his cane to steady himself. He looked at Vader, who was in his bacta tank, almost helpless. Vader watched as his master walked up to the glass and smiled at him. Vader couldn't believe it. It was all a dream. Then he saw Maul walk in, followed closely by the Grand Inquisitor. They both nodded at Vader as Sidious walked towards him. Sidious didn't realize it, but as soon as Vader realized it wasn't a dream, he felt his insides begin to crumble. Vader lifted Sidious into the air as he crushed the bacta tank, and his armor filled itself around the husk of skin that was Vader. Vader's mask lowered down across his evil eyes as he stood over Sidious, who looked up at Vader. Sidious felt every organ inside of his body begin to fail. Vader stepped over and kneeled before his master as he told Sidious that he was of no further use to him. As he wrapped his metallic hand around Sidious's neck, Vader continued using the Force to crush Sidious's organs, as Vader stood up and dragged Sidious on the floor behind him, keeping him close, so close to death. The Grand Inquisitor and Maul followed as they watched Sidious's eyes fill with red. Vader's hand was choking him to death. That was not even the beginning. Vader walked outside of his castle and down by the banks of lava that were still loosely floating on the surface of Mustafar. Sidious cried out as if he was begging for mercy. But there was no mercy on the dark side. As Vader threw the Sith Lord down into a lava bank and watched as his robes caught on fire. Vader stood there and watched as Sidious burned alive in front of him. The Grand Inquisitor asked if Vader was going to kill him. Vader looked over and didn't say a word, as if to tell the Grand Inquisitor that this was only the beginning of the pain that Sidious would face. With no formidable threat in the galaxy, Vader would continue to torture Sidious every waking moment he could, making Sidious wear a painful suit and not allowing him to be placed on bacta to heal the burn wounds. Vader's empire would continue to stretch out across the galaxy. With no formidable foe, the Inquisitorius would continue to serve loyally, and Maul would serve too, as he enjoyed watching Sidious suffer. Vader would never let Sidious live down the lies of his past. The fact that Padme survived meant that Vader killed the remnants of Anakin Skywalker and Padme Amidala when he killed Luke and Leia. Vader blamed Kenobi, but not nearly as much as he blamed Sidious. Kenobi took care of the children until Vader killed them. Sidious kept them from him. Vader would continue his evil empire until the day he died, without anyone ever challenging him or the Empire again. After his death, his legacy would continue to last for generations, as the Sith ruled in his absence for years to come, under the Empire of Vader. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to George Story, Benjamin Wells, Jay Hoffman, Warpigman308, Icy Raptor, and Gort for supporting the channel. Let's hit 2,000 likes on this so we can see what if Plo Koon trained Ahsoka Tano. If you want to see a what if, let me know down below. I read all the comments, but I don't do crossovers. Check out the Twitch community, Discord, and Patreon if you be a part of our incredible community here and support me in other ways. If you want to learn how to win a free lightsaber before July 4th, go down below. There's a pinned comment. On that pinned comment, there is a doc. You click on the doc and you read all the instructions. Just put your name there, and the next lightsaber will be given away in about 5 days. So stay tuned for that. Now let's talk about our story. So this was a fun story. I enjoyed this. I was really interested in the idea of doing what if Vader reached his full potential, because I don't know if we've ever seen that before. And the idea is that he is such a powerful being, literally born because of the Force, that he wouldn't be he wouldn't struggle with the Force because of his inability to have limbs. Much like other beings who have their limbs and all this stuff, and when they lose their limbs, they struggle to use the Force. With Anakin, it would, I guess, not technically make sense in canon, but in the story make sense of it, that because he was born of the Force, he was literally a vessel of the Force. And while he was on the dark side, the fact is that Anakin would just be an absolute maniac. I mean, if he could control the true power of himself, I mean, he would just be unstoppable. And while I know he would be unstoppable, I want to make the fights interesting, and that's something I want to talk about real quick, is the fact that the fights are elongated. Vader would just kill them all. I mean, it would be too easy. I mean, he could just walk in there and that'd be it. Everyone would be dead. But that's not the point I wanted to do here. I didn't want him just to do that. That makes a boring story, that makes the sequences boring, and that makes the tension boring. Obviously, you know Vader's not going to die. It's just not going to happen. You know, I give you the hope, I give you the feeling that maybe Luke and Leia could do something, but I crushed that the second Luke was killed. And that was the point. Vader is going to be overpowered as hell. And I'm taking a little bit of what we've seen in the Kenobi show and trying to bring it to life in this video, because I think there's a lot that we see in the Kenobi show that really gives us a lot more Vader. And I think that lot more Vader that we see in the Kenobi show is something we can take advantage of here. And I think that's what I tried to do here, is take advantage of what we've seen Vader do and really show the true power that he could achieve if he had become literally what he was meant to be if he was Anakin Skywalker. So I really wanted to take advantage of that, and I think it worked out pretty interestingly, without making Vader too overpowered and without making it too boring, I hope. As for Maul, I thought Maul was a fun instrument, and I also thought it'd be really interesting to see Maul and Vader team up. Now, let's be honest here, Maul is a smart person, he's not dumb, he's not going to try and challenge Vader, we know that. If he fought Vader, he would lose. And I think Maul, being the person he is, I think he would settle for second in command. I don't see him as a person to try and rise up against Vader. I know Maul is a very fairly independent person, but throughout anything, you see him looking for someone to be by his side. Ahsoka, Ezra, he's just looking for somebody. I mean, Savage was his only somebody, and he lost that somebody. And I think Maul, in a way, was longing to have a partner in crime, and having somebody like Vader, sure, being his master, I think he would decide that he would go with Vader. I think that would be a better choice for Maul. I think Maul would thrive with that. I think Maul would actually enjoy it, having just somebody to be close with. And he would be second in command, obviously, over the Grand Inquisitor. And I think this trio of power, the Grand Inquisitor, Maul, and Vader, I think they would have a mutual respect for one another, but know that Vader was truly in power. I think Vader wouldn't be quite as much of a Sidious as a, you need to bow down to me. Obviously, to show respect, he would expect it, but I think Vader would be a lot nicer than Sidious, and I think he would have a lot more mutual respect with these other characters than not. I think he wouldn't. I think he would be a powerhouse, but I don't think he would belittle them like Sidious would him. And yeah, so I think that's all I have to say about this. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I thought this was a fun, nice, dark side ending story. If you did enjoy it, leave a like down below. I love you all, spread the love, and I will see you guys in the next video. And always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.